Welcome to Chapter 4, the Baroque period. This is a very dramatic time of big changes in music, and we've laid the foundation with the first three chapters of where classical music, Western art music comes from, but this is really where what we still do today started. This is where we establish what's called tonic dominant axis harmony. Tonic, dominant, subdominant, the three chords you learned at the very beginning of the semester. This is where we really start to apply them. And this is where texture starts to change too. Accompaniment styles change. Everything's pretty dramatic. And it happens in a relatively short period of time. Around 1600, we developed opera. We developed a new style, and that required new accompaniment techniques called basso continuo. The written music for it is called figured bass. You can read about it in the textbook. But it changes things to a new style called mono D, not monophonic, mono D. Really means one song. So it's a simple accompaniment with one clear line of music up above. But we're going to change that because we like to make things complicated in music. There's a great quote at the beginning of the chapter. One of my old professors, Joseph Sylvan, taught me this. He had learned it from others, though. And I put it in the first sentence in this chapter. It has been said that for every successful revolution, there must be an eventual evolution that incorporates elements of both the old and new styles. There you go. That's it right there. That's what the Baroque period is all about. We make a dramatic change, revolution, to create this monody style and something brand new, setting drama to music, opera. But then we start reaching back into the Renaissance and bringing forward some of these polyphonic techniques. And different composers do it in different ways. You'll learn that as you go through this chapter. But again, the first thing that happens, guess what? It's opera. Again, Classic FM. Here's some great links for you. Caccini, some guys in Florence called the Florentine Camerata. They all come together and create this new opera thing. It was actually a mistake. They were trying to recreate the Greek tragedies and they thought it had singing and it didn't. They kind of screwed that up, but it created opera, so that's good. This is, again, an English translation of a text by Caccini called The Birth of New Music, where he talks about creating opera and the Camerata, that sort of thing. Next, you have an Ave Maria, and this one's kind of interesting. This was attributed for many years to Caccini, the guy I just talked about. In truth, it was a fake. It was written probably in the 1970s by this guy who was known to create fake classical music. I used it in the first edition of the book, and I attributed it to Caccini because everybody in the classical music world did. Once it was discovered, I actually kept using it in the book because it's a beautiful example of monody, which is the whole point. We want to show you monody. So here's his setting of Ave Maria we were talking last time about. Hey, the different composers are going to set Ave Maria different ways. He just uses the two words Ave Maria. It is a lovely, lovely little piece of music. It is a little too modern, in truth, for the Baroque period, especially the way some people said it. But it's a perfect example of monody. You can see it still says Caccini on the recording, which is kind of funny, but it was actually this Russian dude. But it's monody, and that's the whole point. Then we talk about opera. Here's a big focus on form that deals with recitatives, that deals with aria, that deals with all the different techniques of opera. Learn this carefully because we're going to study opera from here forward through all the rest of the chapters. You got some neat dig deeper links, all really good stuff. Then we start talking about Monteverdi. Monteverdi is the first really important opera composer that we still perform his pieces, and he begins to bring back a little of that polyphony, and he makes the music a lot more interesting. You actually have a madrigal from him. Now here again, he's a transitional composer. His early books of madrigals are just like what you studied in chapter 3. His later books of madrigals change completely. No more polyphony, monody, basso continuo accompaniment, modern harmony styles of the early Baroque. But he's still setting these love poems, which a lot of the madrigal people liked to do. This is a strophic example, and it's a wonderful, wonderful recording. It's a perfect example of his writing style, and he used these same writing styles in his operas as well, which is pretty cool. Then we get to Henry Purcell. the first and last really important British composer of the Baroque period, and the last really important British composer until we get to about 1900 or a little before. You have an example from his most famous opera. This is an aria and a recitative. It's actually, sorry, I said it backwards. It's a recitative and an aria. Lovely, lovely music. Absolutely gorgeous. You'll enjoy it because it's the first thing you get to hear in English, so you can actually understand the words. They are translated here, though, for you because it's opera and it's kind of hard to understand. Then we deal with a huge focus on form for instrumental music. We talk about the trio sonata, and there are two different types: the sonata di chiesa, the church sonata, the sonata da camera, the chamber sonata. And they use this same basso continuo accompaniment that was developed for opera, but now we're stacking instrumental music over it. We get into the solo concerto, which will be important from now until the end of the semester, and this little thing called the concerto grosso that really only happens here in the Baroque period. Make sure you understand the difference between those two. And then I take you to different countries. We look at some Italians, Corelli and the two Scarlattis. We look at some French, Jean-Baptiste Lully, who was actually Italian, but we don't talk about that. He was favored at the French court. He changed his name to a French name. He was French. Francois Couperin, great keyboard composer. Jacques de la Guerre, one of the first really important female composers, and also apparently an amazing performer as well. Little is known about her, but she's pretty fascinating. And we leave the French. We talk about some Germans. Heinrich Schütz, who kept using lots of polyphonic music, we used this new, more modern harmony style. Telemann, who was actually way more famous than Bach in his day, largely forgotten now. And then, of course, the dude we all really need to talk about, JS Bach, arguably the most famous composer of all time. The truth is he wasn't that famous during his day. This dude, Telemann, was way more famous when they were both alive. Bach, though, since then has done nothing but become more and more famous. And we'll talk about that a little more actually in chapter 6, because that's when he starts to sort of reappear. We talk about Bach and polyphony. We talk about Bach and his instrumental music. We talk about Bach and his sacred music. We talk about Bach and his job. Here is Bach's contract for his last gig in the city of Leipzig, and it's really fascinating to read. This is his actual contract translated into English. It's pretty interesting. Here's another important focus on form, the fugue. The fugue is an important polyphonic texture that existed in the Renaissance, but Bach absolutely perfects it here in the Baroque period. Learn all of these terms. They are critical. We'll use them again as we move forward in later chapters. Here's the church at Haarlem. I was actually just in Holland last year, and I got to see this church. It's even more magnificent in person. It sounds fantastic. Go see it. It's awesome. The fugue is used everywhere. It was popular for keyboard works. It was popular for instrumental works. It was popular used in vocal settings as well. So don't think it's just an organ thing, but there were a lot of very famous ones. You have one of the most famous, the Bach Little Fugue in G minor. This is a very traditional setting. Again, the time codes are used throughout here, and here they're very important because you're looking at the subject as it goes by. Here's the subject, here's the answer. You're about to hear the answer start right now. There it is. And then the third voice will enter with the subject again, and so on and so forth. So it becomes really critical using these time codes so you can keep up, because there's a lot to take in with these fugues. And this first one is a really good way to learn it. There are a number of those examples throughout. Here's another couple, Well-Tempered Clavier, again. Play along, follow the time codes. It'll really keep you focused in on what you're supposed to be listening for as the music goes by. The solo cello suite, one of the most famous solo pieces of all time. These wonderful cello suites, fascinating, fascinating music. Then the Brandenburg concertos. These are concerto grossos, which I mentioned just a moment ago. This is probably the most famous of all time. And you have a beautiful example from the second one. There's 6 of these in total, multiple movements each. They're all on the internet. If you like this one, go listen to the rest. You'll love them all. Again, more substantial time codes here that go along because it helps you keep up with what's happening in the music. Bach's vocal compositions. Bach never wrote opera. That's important. But he did do multiple settings of the cantata, sacred and secular, mostly sacred, which were for the Lutheran Church. Now, they don't equate. It's not exactly like the 5 unchanging movements of the Mass Ordinary for the Catholic Mass, but it does have some commonality. You can read all about that and learn about the cantata. Bach did actually do a 5-movement unchanging text of the Kyrie Gloria Credo Sanctus Agnus Dei. It's a 2-hour work. The Mass in B minor, absolutely epic. It goes beyond the scope of this book, so it's not here other than we do talk about it. Then we get to Handel. Again, way more famous in Bach's day than Bach, but now we remember him for a few pieces, in particular a few of his instrumental works. the world fireworks music, the water music, and most importantly, his oratorio, the Messiah. You can read about the oratorio. And again, here's another focus on form that deals with both the cantata and the oratorio. And then finally, we get to this dude, Vivaldi. Now, Vivaldi is here because in terms of time, this is where he belongs. The truth is, some of his music is transitional. It's actually starting to lay the foundation already for what's going to happen in Chapter 5. Hang on tight for some new music in Chapter 5.